Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar titled Nature-Based Solutions to Mitigate Flooding and Stormwater Risks in Cities. I'm just going to wait for a few more minutes before we get started. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. So we have 100 plus people now, and I think we get going with the webinar now. So this webinar is on nature-based solutions to mitigate flooding and stormwater risks in cities. And before we move ahead, just wanted to keep you posted that this webinar has a live interpretation available between English, French, and Bahasa Indonesia. To select the language, you would have to just listen in. Please click on the interpretation button on the control panel at the bottom of your Zoom window, and you can choose your preferred language. I do see a lot more people joining in. So welcome everyone again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening again. So this webinar, the next slide, please. This webinar is on nature-based solution to mitigate flooding and stormwater risks in cities. I do see a few more people joining in, and as people join in, I would request everybody to drop in your name, where are you joining in from, and what do you work on? It would be good to see everybody's information on the chat. The next slide, please. Welcome again, everyone. My name is Priya Narayanan. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Urban Development at WRI India, and I'm thrilled to be your host today, and I'll be taking you through the different sections that are there in this webinar today, and also I'd be your MC today. I'd love for participants to introduce themselves again and put their information on the chat. The next slide, please. So the webinar is on nature-based solutions to mitigate flooding and stormwater risks in the city. So this is part of a three-series webinar, and this is specifically designed to capacity build city officials to build resilience to really climate hazards and growing hazards and risks and threats in the city. So we've had two different sessions of the webinar earlier. The first webinar specifically focused on climate hazard and vulnerability assessment in cities was delivered on 5th February. And the second webinar to tackle urban heat was delivered on 5th March. For those who missed these webinars, the recordings would be dropped. The links to the recordings will be dropped by my colleagues on the chat now. And today's webinar is the last in the three-series webinar, and it's on a very timely topic, urban flooding. But we've not just focused on the challenge itself, but specifically also on solutions and the different case examples to tackle urban flooding across the globe. So this particular webinar series, these are the three series, these have been hosted by UrbanShift in collaboration with WRI India and Cities for Forest. UrbanShift is a global platform that supports cities to adapt integrated approaches to urban development, shaping a resilient, inclusive, zero-carbon future where both people and planet can thrive. UrbanShift is funded by the Global Environment Facility and led by the United Nations Environment Program in partnership with the World Resource Institute, C40 Cities, ICLAI, UNDP, World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank. The next slide, please. So during the webinar, you might have a lot of questions. I encourage all of you to use the Q&A function on the control panel at the bottom of your Zoom window. My colleagues will respond to them, and you can also address the questions directly to the speakers. They would also respond and drop the responses in the Q&A of your specific Q&A on the chat. Next slide, please. In terms of the agenda, my colleague Mukta from WRI India will be presenting the introductory remarks, and then you will hear from my colleague Sahana, who will be delivering the technical presentation specifically focused on urban flooding and nature-based solution. And there'll be a moderated panel discussion with 4 speakers from across the different parts of the world who have implemented nature-based solutions, who are practicing, and people from really different contexts will be sharing their inputs. And with that, now I hand over the floor to Mukta. Over to you, Mukta.
I hope I'm audible and visible. And hello, hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone present here. It's an honor to be here today as we gather to discuss the pressing challenges and issues around urban flooding and stormwater management, and also share our experience in tackling some of these challenges here in cities in India. As we are aware, with climate change, right, fundamentally altering our rainfall patterns, also changing the frequency and intensity. At the same time, we are witnessing prolonged dry spells in certain urban centers, and which has also elevated the risk of water scarcity, and there are large concerns about it. So this paradox, right, of simultaneously occurrence of both floods and water scarcity, this is often due to poor water management infrastructure. Many times it's because of loss of natural water retention areas in urban cities become more urbanized. It's also mainly largely because of outdated drainage systems, uh, and such kind of drainage systems and practices which often only prioritize quickly diverting the water or storm water away rather than capturing and retaining and storing it for future use. Now we've seen the traditional stormwater management practice and the engineered solutions, and they do remain essential to this date. We also need a newer approach and an innovative approach, given that the entire climate scenario today is evolving, and which actually calls for a larger paradigm shift. And exactly this is the paradigm shift that we would be talking and discussing today through the technical presentation and also the panel discussion, and see what are some of these case studies and how exactly this shift is happening and how our cities leading it from the forefront. One of the most effective pathways forward is the integration of blue-green areas and groundwater management in urban water management systems. This largely involves restoring and expanding urban wetlands, green and open spaces, and green corridors to enhance natural water retention and infiltration. Simultaneously understanding and utilizing the practice of groundwater management and also aquifers through comprehensive mapping, planning, policy, and implementation of like simplest techniques such as rainwater harvesting. They are vital solutions, which are also a step in the right direction. So these nature-based solutions, they not only help to mitigate flooding, but they also contribute to the larger groundwater recharge uh, ecosystem. They provide a more holistic approach to the practice. They also help in improving water quality, and it also offers a wide array of co-benefits, such as enhanced biodiversity or more open recreational spaces for communities to come together, closer, interact, and work. It's also very important for me to mention that these successful implementation of such projects, they do require a collaborative effort. It demands a larger engagement from policymakers like us to urban planners, engineers from the city management, city administration, environmental experts, and local communities. All of them play a crucial role in some of these projects, implementation projects. And more importantly, it also necessitates a robust technical capacity at all different levels of governance. In today's training, my colleague Sahana will delve into some of these complexities and nitty-gritties of urban flooding and stormwater management. Sahana is a senior manager with the Urban Water Resilience Practice here in WRI India, and through an exploration of innovative practices and a few select global case studies, she'll illustrate how cities are effectively incorporating blue-green infrastructure into building their own climate resilience. Um, so yeah, this session will also provide insights into the why and the how of addressing these challenges, hoping to foster a deeper understanding of sustainable water, stormwater management and flood management. I encourage all the participants today to actively participate, explore some of these innovative solutions. Do reach out to us at the end, and we hope there are larger objectable key takeaways for you towards the end of the session. Thank you, and over to you, Priya.
Thank you very much, Mukta, for highlighting the importance of the blue-green infrastructure, groundwater management, and really conserving the natural assets in cities. And the collaborative efforts to really push this forward. So now it's my pleasure to welcome my colleague Sahana, who's Senior Program Manager with the Urban Water Resilience Portfolio at WRI India. So over to you, Sahana.
Thank you so much, Priya and Mukta, for the kind words. Saili, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Welcome all. Thank you for joining this session where we will talk on the issues of urban flooding in growing cities and pathways that various regions are experimenting with towards improved urban stormwater management and flood resilience. This session has two major sections. The first, we will explore the interconnected causes that lead to urban floods. And the second is the innovative approaches and solutions towards improved resilience. But between these two sections is a reflective exercise where we will apply some of our understanding of the urban climate stormwater nexus to identify complex interlinked causes and impacts. To understand flooding in cities, we need to gain a little bit of a deeper insight into how climate change, the water cycle, and urban areas intersect and consequently impact stormwater flows in surface and underground areas, in both human constructed and in naturally occurring networks. And at the nexus of these three factors of climate, urban, and the hydrological cycle lie the growing and highly dense population centers, particularly in our global south regions, which are exposed to extreme rainfall events, face increased flooding because of the way we have built our cities, primarily as impermeable surfaces, and the subsequent exposure to water and vector-borne diseases following flooding from contamination of drinking water and sanitation services. But to delve a little deeper into these aspects, when we talk of climate uncertainty with regards to climate change, what this refers to is the difficulty that we have in predicting the consequences of climate change. So particularly with regards to rainfall, which is the root of our stormwater issues, we are very limited in our ability to accurately predict all of the time when and how much rainfall a region will receive. And what this does is it impedes people and urban system operators like bus operators and transit operators in being adequately prepared. So climate change is also causing an intensification of the hydrological or the water cycle. And this is happening in a variety of ways, but primarily we have warmer and wetter conditions across the world. Essentially what this means is climate change driven global temperature increases are increasing evaporation rates and increasing precipitation volumes. So how does this interlink is that with more evaporation, there is more water held in the atmosphere, and the storms therefore which are produced are highly intense and can cause extreme rainfall in many areas. And the third layer that we look at are this rainfall falling on cities. Now, cities are really concentrated population centers in relatively small areas. And so that we have really high densities. And what this means, therefore, is that because of this concentration, the number of people affected by an extreme event like a flood is very high. So one single extreme rainfall event or multiple days of moderate to heavy rainfall will impact a much larger number of people in our dense urban centers as compared to much sparser rural areas. So over the next few slides, what I'll try to take you through is exploring how the urban footprint specifically contributes to flood conditions in our cities. And we start with what we call impervious areas, which is the primary characteristic of most of our cities. This is all of the land area which is covered by buildings or by pavement or roads, gravel or any other material which will significantly inhibit how stormwater penetrates the soil. Now, a range of studies help us identify that the percentage of runoff generated is based on the type of surface. And what it tells us is that not just tarred or concretized surfaces, but even compacted earth, bare earth, which you get after you clear cut woodlands or you're preparing a site for construction, also has very high runoff coefficients. And this is a condition which is very common in our global south regions where our cities are still being developed. And what I mentioned about runoff coefficient, so this is the number that compares the amount of runoff that we see to the amount of rainfall. Essentially, it's a measure used in hydrology to understand how precipitation is transformed into runoff. The other terminology we often use is runoff peak or peak runoff. This is the highest rate of runoff that will occur after a rainfall. But why are such mathematical expressions useful, or why do we even need to understand it? Is because traditional stormwater management, as we see in this image, for densely urbanized areas, rely extensively on underground drainage networks and infrastructures, and these have to be designed. But the challenge is that we have to constantly expand these systems to keep pace with the sprawl that keeps getting added on, and all of this new urban development that may happen across jurisdictional boundaries. We all know a lot of our urban development happens outside of our municipal boundaries. So this rapid urbanization causes more impermeable surfaces, leads to faster peak runoff and increased runoff volumes, and places an immense strain on existing drainage capacity. And one final aspect that we will explore through these images that we see of the city of Chennai in India. What we have done is we have overlaid what you see in the dotted white over the Google Earth image are the extents of two historical man-made tanks. Now, these extents are derived from very detailed Survey of India maps from the 1970s. And putting them over Google Earth images, what we see is that buildings, roads, and a lot of other urban assets have developed within these historical demarcations. And during rainfall events, these areas, of course, flood. So alongside the erratic extreme rains, the climate change aspect, the impermeable surfaces because of our cities, a very fundamental reason for urban areas to flood is we have built-in areas where water will flow or collect. And it is very likely that all of us attending today, we can think of examples of areas or neighborhoods in the cities we know of or the cities we have lived in, where areas are called lake view or lake bed or riverfront, which is in their name, but neither lake or river are visible any longer, having long since been built over. As we look through the earlier slides on the various factors that are relevant to causing and exacerbating urban floods, we also have to learn about the ways people, communities, and infrastructure are impacted. Flood waters entering homes and businesses is only one of the ways in which urban floods will cause disruptions to urban lives. Of course, the most immediate and visible impact from floods in urban regions is the loss of life and damage to property. But this damage is also bundled with impacts on various socioeconomic factors, such as affecting education, as schools and colleges may be flooded, affecting livelihoods, as workplaces may be flooded, roads leading to these destinations may be waterlogged, floodwaters may have swept away school books and work tools. In addition to this, combined sewer and stormwater systems, which are very typical across many of our cities, primarily in global south cities again, leads to a decrease in the carrying capacity of drains. Also, solid waste is a big concern in choking the drains that we have. And to manage this, we need frequent and labor-intensive maintenance to desilt, which is primarily taken up before monsoons. These are images from Chennai, Mumbai, and Hyderabad from the left. And this is a very common problem across many of our cities. But removing commingled sewage is actually a much more intractable problem. And last, and definitely not least, are the impacts on health. Urban flooding presents a complex web of health hazards. So you have immediate risk from physical trauma, but there is an aftermath, where a surge of waterborne diseases like cholera, typhoid, leptospirosis due to contaminated water mixing with sewage occurs. And you also see surges in mosquito-borne illnesses such as dengue and malaria because of the stagnant waters. These are the images tracking changes like this in the city of Mumbai. And beyond the physical health aspects, there is significant psychological trauma, mental and emotional health risks that occur because of floods, such as triggering anxiety or depression in a lot of populations. Now we'll change direction a little bit over here. Over the next few slides, we'll look at a major flood event from August 2022 in the city of Bengaluru, India, where I live, and reflect on the conditions that led to this situation. As you can see in this image from August 30th of 2022, the situation was dire. People were rescued by boat from flooded homes. To give context, though, Bengaluru sits in a semi-arid zone, but 2022 was an extreme year. That year alone, in August of 2022, 400% more rainfall happened in that month as compared to long-term averages, so it was exceptionally rainy. But what I invite you to do over the next few slides is to move the rainfall information a little to the back and see what other factors might have contributed to these flooding conditions. So what we see in this slide is Bengaluru is in southern India, fairly equidistant from the ocean bodies. The city has undulating terrain, that's the middle image, and is dotted with a lot of water bodies. These were originally irrigation tanks for local villages, but have now become part of the urban fabric of the city and are extremely diminished and depleted and changed from what their original form and characteristic was. In the next slide, what we see is this Google Earth image from 2025 of that affected region. And the red dot is approximately where the photograph was taken from. What we see is about 5 lakes in the surrounding areas, which are in blue, green marking a lot of undeveloped land, and a fairly dense urban footprint with roads and buildings. If we go to the next slide, what we see is the same region in 2011. And this is from a little over a decade earlier, which are much sparser footprint from the area, a lot of natural spaces between the lakes. So clearly there has been a change in the natural landscape. The next slide shows us an animation of how dramatic this change has been between 1995 to 2015. And there is topographic detail added on to that animation, which shows us clearly how built development, particularly in low-lying areas, has become a major contributor to the flood. So if you go to the next slide, and I'll just pause for a minute to let you watch this. So essentially what we have done is, ignoring the topography of the land, we have constructed in valleys and ridges, which in turn has altered the original hydrological networks. So the lakes today are isolated water bodies. Their upstream and downstream connections are compromised, often completely severed. The bulk of the flooding and stagnation in Bengaluru for 2022 was because of obstructions in these valley areas. There were very few instances of flooding outside for that particular year. But what we see from that is Bengaluru, like many other cities, when not underwater, is facing a water crisis. Availability of local water sources, particularly groundwater, drops during hot summer months. It's already happening this year. So let us reflect a moment on what we are seeing so far. Many global south cities are increasingly grappling with that paradox that Mukta mentioned of having flooding and water scarcity, and often simultaneously. And these extreme events are becoming more frequent, more severe. What do we do then? How do we think of stormwater in this 25th year into the new millennium? Is there any way of devising alternate paths, or do we continue to build ways to drain water faster and faster away? What are the possibilities in the context of climate change? And this is what we will try to explore in this next section of the presentation for another 15 minutes or so. So first off, what if we were to reconsider how we think of stormwater? What if we thought of stormwater as a resource, which it is? And what if we thought of it as a resource to be conserved and used, and only drained away as a last resort? Only when excess waters that cannot be absorbed by vegetation or detained in water bodies or recharge aquifers, only that is let away. So this revised stormwater management would concurrently look at flood mitigation and water security together, and put in interventions that would try to achieve both goals. And we explored this possible path with these 6 processes that are laid out. And this is a synthesis of various innovative practices we'll look through a little bit later. And in essence, what we do is address stormwater at every point of its journey from onto the surface of the earth to until when it drains away. We first talk of slowing the water, which is to reduce the force and speed with which stormwater hits the surface. Next, we detain, which is to hold water temporarily so that storm drains are not overwhelmed. Or we retain, which is to keep water back for use. So anything from a rain barrel to a rain cistern to an underground rain tank, to be able to hold the water back for our use. We then treat water so that we reduce contaminant loads before they enter receiving water bodies like rivers and lakes. We recharge using this treated stormwater to replenish surface and subsurface reservoirs. And finally, we release, where excess waters, and only excess waters, which are not diverted in any of the above steps, are allowed to travel through drainage networks and enter downstream water bodies. There are various alternative pathways which actually capture this process, and we will look through a few of these, and they do not depend solely on drainage, and there are many commonalities across these approaches. So first off, what we talk of is the sponge city philosophy, which is very prevalent nowadays, and it has been made widely popular in China. And the intent here is to distribute and retain water at its source, to slow down water as it flows away from its source, clean water naturally, and be adaptive to water at the sink where water accumulates. And this process is in stark contrast to the conventional solution of grey infrastructure, which was to centralize and accumulate water using big reservoirs, speed up the flow by pipes and channeled drains, and fight water essentially at the end by stronger, higher flood walls and dams. And it is important to note that China, which is very focused on very centralized solutions, is the one which has been promoting sponge cities so extensively. And moving on from that, that fight with water is really the approach that the Netherlands used to have in managing stormwater and flooding, given their unique geographical context, until they moved to the Room for Rivers program. And this is one of the most innovative flood management programs that are available or looked at globally. So faced with this increasing threat of climate change and rising river levels, the Dutch government really recognized the limitation of solely relying on higher and higher dikes. And therefore, the program for Room for Rivers really aims to expand the capacity of rivers to handle peak flows and reduces the risk of inundation in downstream populated areas. The strategy involves giving rivers more physical space, and this is done through a variety of measures, whether it is to relocate dikes further inland, to deepen flood plains and increase water storage, create side channels to divert excess waters, and so on. And WRI India, in partnership with BMC in Mumbai, we have been exploring this process for the Mithi River. This is an urban river flowing through the city of Mumbai, and for almost its 17-kilometer stretch through the river, it is highly channelized. And it was done as a flood risk mitigation effort. But what it has done, therefore, is alter the capacity in various places of how much the river can take and absorb water. And the impact of this mismanagement is really borne by the people who live and work on this riverfront. And here we propose a reimagined vision for the river, which is to find spaces along it where openings could allow the river to swell during periods of heavy rainfall, and to repurpose recreational land such as playgrounds, also called maidans, which can detain excess stormwater when the river surges, particularly because this submerges stormwater drain outlets into the river at this point. Moving on from that practice is what we call low impact development. This is actually quite common in the United States. And this is a set of practices to use natural processes to manage stormwater, reduce its impact on the environment. And this is a very site level planning process for new constructions or redevelopments. What it tries to do is match the natural hydrology of the site in its undeveloped state to what the developed state will become. So trying to find a balance between this to minimize the effects of stormwater. Another principle that's often used are water-sensitive urban design principles. This is really drawn from Australian principles, who are really good at working with little water or managing stormwater in their continent as well. And what we see is through this practice, there are various design principles which give us opportunities to increase infiltration, increase groundwater recharge, and hold back stormwaters to be able to achieve more vibrant and healthy waterways and more livable cities. And finally, we talk of the sustainable urban drainage systems, or SUDS, again, something that's a bit more prolific in the United Kingdom. And this also looks at a natural approach to managing drainage systems around properties and developments as an alternate to traditional drainage. They are designed to temporarily store water during storm events, reduce peak flows, and reduce surface water runoff. And again, it does this by mimicking the natural cycle of water management by retaining water where it lands. So while we have explored various types of approaches, scale is actually a big factor in responding to managing stormwater. So what size is the intervention? At what scale do you administer it is really something to explore further and understand better. We begin with the largest scale, which is the watershed scale for interventions. And what this does is it recognizes that urban flooding within a city's boundary is often influenced by factors way beyond the city limits. So therefore, instead of directing solutions only at the urban core, these interventions address the entire watershed and therefore consider the upstream and downstream interactions and talk of reducing flows in upstream areas so that flooding in downstream areas are also reduced. The next sort of approach we have is to look at it from a city network approach. And we talk of integrating blue-green infrastructure throughout the city in a network which will help mimic the natural hydrological process, reduce runoff, improve water quality, and so on. Another alternative way of envisioning this network approach is also to look at existing infrastructure networks. So whether it is transit lines and so on, and to have blue-green systems or nature-based systems built along this. So imagine rainwater harvesting systems alongside metro lines or tram lines and so on. One example again from the Methi River, because partly because WRI India is doing some good amount of deep engagement over here. This is an example of building in urban wetlands and bioswales, which will help provide additional storage, slow down peak flows, and so on. And while these are independent programs or projects, as you see in the photograph, as you see in the map, there's a larger vision of a much larger intervention at a network scale, where the entire hydrological network leading into the Methi River will be addressed. And what we see in the next slide are these sort of interventions of, recapturing spaces along the river where water harvesting or greening can occur. And from the photographs, what you see is that this not only helps reduce flood risk, but it also can enhance biodiversity, improve air quality, and creates these really aesthetically pleasing urban spaces. Most important, of course, from my opinion, is also looking at blue-green infrastructure along roadside design, because roads are across the entire city. They are in every part of our city, and they are one of the most important infrastructure, and a large percentage of our city systems are designed. And if we are able to make these more resilient and sustainable through putting in measures for reducing stormwater flows on the concretized surface of the road itself, this can help improve the aesthetic and environmental value of our urban streets and reduce stormwater issues. And we have tried this in a certain extent in the city of Chennai, India, where it's not got into all of the aesthetic parts. But as you can see in the photograph, what it has done is really looked at flood hotspot zones and put in a lot of groundwater recharge programs in these hotspots. And this has been driven by a really strong community who has championed the process with the city municipality as well. Moving on to a much more local scale of the neighborhood, many cities across Paris, Singapore, New Orleans have transformed their existing open and vacant spaces, such as city parks or playgrounds, into water-prudent landscapes using blue-green interventions. And what this does is the spaces then integrate nature into the urban fabric. They increase biodiversity, reconnect urban dwellers, and at the same time become these sinks for stormwaters and are able to absorb them at a very neighborhood and decentralized scale. And we have a few, this example from the Lalubhai compound in Mumbai. This is a neighborhood intervention approach, which we are trying out there. This is a rehabilitation and resettlement colony, and it faces a range of issues, socioeconomic factors being a key driver. But if you have watched the previous webinar on heat mitigation, you would have seen this showcase there as well. And this really highlights the adaptability of nature-based systems, such as greening in this case, and its ability to provide multiple benefits. Further, the use of natural systems also helps revive biodiversity, creates recreational space for the community, which is really needed in this particular community. And if well designed and well maintained, is really an asset for the community who are deprived in so many other ways. And finally, at the scale of individual properties too, there are very simple measures, whether it's a rain barrel or a rooftop runoff capture system, to help reduce the strain on municipal drainage. And these are particularly useful to be thought of and implemented in large properties like institutional campuses or IT or business parks, because we can imagine a large volume of rainwater which is captured and diverted away from municipal systems and managed on site. And I would like to close in the next couple of slides essentially, and I want to end this with a call to action. I invite everyone joining in today to join us in this journey to rethink about how stormwater is addressed in your city and your neighborhood, to inform and transform city planners' approaches from stormwater drainage to stormwater management, and to think of stormwater as this very critical resource that can underpin urban water security. And in the next slide, I will lay out some initial thoughts on how this call for action can be taken up by various stakeholders working to address or affected by urban stormwaters. First off, I call on urban practitioners. So whether you are in the field or in academics, I say to you, you are at the very forefront of bringing together innovations and new practices. Maybe you're working on retention systems, maybe nature-based solutions, but to really test these solutions and evaluate their effectiveness across various rainfall scenarios, because this is evidence that is missing at this point. And the other aspect to explore is to see how these solutions can be added onto conventional drainage solutions and help augment their capacities. Because see, the reality is that when we look at our really large, really dense cities, large drainage systems cannot be replaced. But as we are increasingly seeing, they are not enough by themselves. So by how much can they be supported with these nature-based solutions? We need the evidence for that to be really strategic and intentional in applying it. To city planners and stormwater department officials next, I invite you to explore pathways and processes which will enable this integration of all these unconventional practices that practitioners may bring in. And now, whether it is to update your tendering and procurement practice or to set up a stormwater lab, which will help test new solutions for your city, if you can join hands with practitioners and communities to ideate on these possibilities, that would be a great step to look forward to. And this is a repeat, but if there are ways to look beyond drainage, because what drainage does is it's fundamentally a resource that is falling on your jurisdiction that you're moving away to another jurisdiction. Also, cities have a vast amount of private property. City codes and policies must address the flow of stormwater in these spaces. So whether it is incentives to increase rainwater detention on site or higher fees when private property releases their stormwaters into municipal assets, these have to be built into your city codes as well. And the final call of action is to, of course, the community stakeholders, who at the end are the ones facing issues with stormwater and have the most to lose, or possibly the most to gain. Can community become engaged stewards of stormwater infrastructure? Whether it is you tending to local rain gardens or keeping storm drains free of solid waste, whether you are large property owners like campuses looking to improve on-site stormwater practices and become demonstration sites for safely keeping the maximum amount of stormwater on-site, and also become champions for the cause of integrated and holistic stormwater practices for your neighborhoods and for your cities. And with this, I end my presentation. I'm very happy to respond to any of your queries in the chat. Please do contact me at this email for more details and discussions. And back to you, Priya, to take us through the next part of this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sahana, for that really, information-filled and also like really well laid out session of the webinar itself. So just picking from what Sahana said, drain it as a last resort and really call to action for practitioners, city decision makers, and also the community. And I think we definitely do not want to fight with water and build a narrative across cities around the world to really live and with water, because it's probably non-negotiable. So without further delay, I think I'd move on to the interesting part of today's session. I just introduced the panelists one by one, and then so for today's session, we have Dr. Nisha Priya Mani. She's a sustainable city specialist. She works with the Asian Development Bank, and she has over 15 years of experience in building natural infrastructure and healthy cities conversations across different parts, different cities in India as well. Thank you, Dr. Nisha, for joining us today. I would welcome in next Ibu Meslin Maibu. She's head of the Environment Pollution Subdivision, City Environmental Agency, Jaipura. Terima kasih, Meslin, for joining us today. Next, I would request Mr. Haribandhu, a retired engineer with a great deal of experience in operationalizing water body rejuvenation across Odisha. So he's currently the advisor to the Water Resource Unit, Department of Housing and Urban Development, Government of Odisha. Welcome, sir. Finally, I would request Natasha Naidu, Manager, Regional Stormwater Planning, Johannesburg Road Agency, who again has 15 plus years of experience in the built environment sector and in embedding a lot of innovative solutions within the road and the built environment sector. So thanks for joining, Natasha. I see all the panelists have turned on your camera. Thank you again for being with us. I think I'd start on early because I think we have another half an hour, but let me just move on to Dr. Nisha. So Nisha, you've great experience in working in Chennai and you've restored this amazing Kadapakam lake. So I'd really invite you to share specific details of the project and how they've helped in mitigating urban flooding and enhancing the local ecosystems, specifically around the lake. So if you could share some insight in a couple of minutes, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Priya. So, yeah, I work on a Kadapakam Lake Restoration Project as a part of nature-based solutions for addressing flood mitigation as well as drought mitigation process. So this project is in Chennai, north of Chennai, which is the Kosastalya River Basin, which extends about 127 square kilometers. And North Chennai is one of the vulnerable for flood. So as a part of flood mitigation, this nature opening the lake, which is to
Dr. Nisha, your voice is kind of breaking. If you want to switch off the camera for a second, that's fine. We're not able to hear you properly. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Thanks, Priya. So, yeah, the project involves increasing the water storage capacity of the lake by deepening it. And this is all done by the nature-based solutions, is all done by carrying out hydrological interventions. We are doing certain environmental and ecological interventions, engineering interventions, as well as recreational and architectural interventions. So as part of hydrological interventions, we are improving the feeder channels of the lake, which includes cleaning, deepening, widening, and embankment stabilization of the lake. And we have also planned for periodical maintenance of all the hydraulic structures, including the feeder channels, the outlet channels, the surplus weirs, etc., which will help in balancing the flood water that is coming to the lake. And as a part of treating the pollution, just like how Sahana was explaining in the previous slides, we need to kind of retain, detain, treat, recharge, and release. We are having a 4-bay pond at the entrance of the Kadapakam Lake. So this would kind of treat the incoming the stormwater runoff that is coming into the lake, and it'll take off the sediments with it. It'll allow settling time for the sediments, which will also reduce the suspended solids of the incoming flow. This is a part of nature-based solutions for treating the stormwater runoff that is coming into the lake. So these are some of the hydrological interventions that we're doing. And as a part of environmental and ecological interventions, we are creating an urban forest inside the lake premises with the native species. And for fencing the lake, we are using biofencing, which is also called live fencing using native trees. And we are actively engaging with the stakeholders around the lake. So it involves inland government departments as well as communities, and especially the farmers, for designing, planning, and even implementation of the project. One example, when we had designed the project and had a consultation with the local communities and farmers, the farmers were flagging off like, yeah, this is a good project. You're going to increase the water capacity of the lake. But as a part of the recreational activity, you have proposed a boating facility, which we are not comfortable with. They said they are using the lake water primarily for agricultural purposes. And if the lake water is also used for a boating facility, maybe it would require a certain level of water, which is required for the boating facility throughout. Therefore, the local community and farmers were not comfortable with the boating facility, and we were willing to change this at the part of the designing phase itself. So that was much welcomed by the local residents, and then on we are just going on a very collaborative manner in taking up this project. So this was part of the environmental and ecological interventions. And as part of engineering interventions, we would say we are deepening the lake with the help of excavators and dredgers. And we're also increasing the bund height about 2 meters, which is in a dilapidated conditions now. This would also increase the storage capacity of the lake, thereby contributing to the flood mitigation benefits as well as the drought mitigation benefits, and also enhancing the local biodiversity and groundwater recharge. And as a part of engineering intervention, we are also rejuvenating the inlet canals, the feeder channels, the entire final channels running about 1.5 kilometers is also being rejuvenated. And the surplus weir is also being slightly heightened to hold increased water storage in the lake. Yeah, so these are some of the engineering interventions, and the 4-bay pond construction will also be a part of engineering intervention, which will also serve like for pollution treatment. And as part of recreational and architectural interventions, we'll be having a children's park and play field. All with the nature-based solutions. We are using recycled fly ash. We are using recycled materials and fly ash bricks as part of environmental friendly components. So these are some of the interventions that we are taking at Kadapakam Lake. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha, for sharing that, and really the importance of local engagement from the design phase. I think those are some big learnings that are being shared across the globe in different case studies. I would also request all the speakers to just stick to a couple of minutes. We do have a lot of questions to ask you, and a lot of questions are coming up in the chat as well. So moving forward, Ibu Meslin, the question to you is, can you share some insights of the key NBS approaches your agency is implementing in Jaipura to mitigate specifically urban flooding and manage stormwater effectively, and any inspirational initiatives that you would want to share with us today? Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. There are two main nature-based solutions that have been implemented by the Jayapura city government. They are the development of green open spaces and planting trees on critical land. For green open spaces, the government has issued a mayoral decree in 2012, which includes the number of city parks in Jayapura. There are 38 city parks, a total area of almost 9,000 square meters, and also 3 city forests covering an area of 995 hectares. This was inspired by Surabaya City. Our ministry, environmental ministry, has a program called Adipura, and this is a form of incentive for cities or districts with good performance in waste management and green open spaces. And Surabaya City has already received this award. So our previous mayor also wanted to receive this award. So at the time, the decree was issued. The second is we carry out critical land rehabilitations, and this program is also carried out annually. In 2024, we planted 300 trees in Prembi forests, one of the city forests, and in 2023, we planted 500 trees in Mount Gurabesi, one of the critical lands. We also train community to make biopore holes, that is infiltration holes, made vertically in the ground with diameter of 10 to 15 centimeters and a depth of 70 to 100 centimeters. These holes function to overcome puddles. Rehabilitation is not only carried out by the government, but also involves community group in community groups such as youth groups, churches, mosques, and so on. Thank you, Priya. Back to you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And those small interventions to mitigate those puddles, I think those are the smaller interventions and at-scale interventions that we are looking at for cities to implement across the globe. And now over to you, Mr. Haribandu sir. And I mean, Odisha is a standard example because close to 500 lakes across the ULBs really have been rejuvenated or in the process. and by the State Water Resource Department to really secure a lot of the water structures in Orissa. So can you please tell us about the project and what kind of guidelines are we really drafting and applying for NBS interventions at really such a large scale? Thank you very much, sir. So you're on mute. Could you please unmute yourself?
Can hear me? The journey has started in the year 2022. While government was exploring ways and means to protect the dying water bodies across the urban Odisha, Housing and Urban Development Department actually has come across the technique of Mr. Anand Maligawad, who is popularly known as Lakeman of India. He is a water conservationist from Bangalore. Actually, after he has rejuvenated 1,000 acres of water bodies that resulted in over 3,000 crores of liters of holding capacity area.
Sorry to.
Are you? Did you get my? Is there any problem? Yes.
Yeah.
Are you getting me or not?
Do you use for internet? Yeah.
Internet?
I can't hear you. Yeah.
So you got my.
Sorry, Priya, I think it's your connection.
Yeah.
Will I continue?
Sir, please continue. I think Priya is facing some issues.
Okay. Actually, after witnessing his approach and successful completed models, department in association with Mr. Anand Maligawad has taken one initiative named as Ama Pokhari. Pokhari means in Odia, it is in India, it is called as pond, water bodies. So its name is Ama Pokhari, to rejuvenate the polluted water bodies across all the urban local bodies in Odisha. The initiative seeks to restore water bodies without relying on quick fixes or artificial interventions. So instead, the program, Ama Pokhari program, aims a nature-based approach using soil-water interface, phytoremediation, natural aeration to cleanse the water, adopting the natural processes, and that one keep these ecosystems thriving. The comprehensive guidelines were formulated and process has been standardized for all urban local bodies through standard operating procedure, SOP. At the outset, the government has implemented few pilot projects in Bhubaneswar and Cuttack under the mentorship of Mr. Anand Maligawad. After witnessing the outcomes and benefits, the initiative has been scaled up throughout the state. Over 1,200 urban local bodies officials and 1,900 SSG groups, self-help groups, actually mainly ladies, women, were sensitized and trained on the ecological approach for implementation. Capacity building workshops and trainings are organized periodically to relevant stakeholders to make them cope with the developments and strategies. Actually, this rejuvenation process includes 13 items. Is dewatering, de-weeding, desilting, then excavation of Mother Earth and bond strengthening, then compaction, then plantation, then making the approach road or pathway, all these things. And nature, actually native plantations have been actually planted in the banks of the water bodies. It is giving a lot of you cannot imagine. Once you will visit only, you can feel the success story of it. So it is that's all on this issue. If you want, you can come to Bhubaneswar, you can come to Odisha and visit number of water bodies, find the result, and you will be happy. I think so. We have visited Bangalore, no doubt.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
here we have implemented it in throughout the Odisha state. So you can't imagine what is happening there. You'll feel it.
No, thank you very much, for sharing about Amar Pokhri and extending the invite for participants across the globe here. So if you all can hear what Mr. Haribandhu just shared. So over to you, Natasha. Just wanted to get your reflections on really currently, I mean, what are the priorities for nature-based solutions, especially to address and flooding challenges, and what immediate steps are being taken really to protect vulnerable communities? And I say this because there probably was a cloudburst flooding event earlier this month in Johannesburg, and what really is the city doing to in terms of taking some immediate and long-term actions for mitigating the situation. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Priya. I'll try and keep it quick. Like you're saying, the Johannesburg area is prone to flash flooding. It's usually between the December and March period. And coupled with that, Johannesburg has historically been known as the concrete jungle. But in the recent decades, with the global movement towards environmental sustainability and climate change, and the city has made leaps and bounds in trying to get in line with the movement, and great efforts in this idea of nature-based solutions. So the attempts sometimes have been a great success, sometimes it has been a miss. Our successes are in projects like our tree planting projects, where communities have really just embraced urban gardens and fruit trees in their streets. And then there's some misses where, there's infrastructure that's installed and vandalized not long after that. So we're still learning what fits Johannesburg best with regard to nature-based solutions. But we are in turn building a directory of successes and failures as well while we're doing that. The protection of vulnerable communities, well, as you know, like in urban areas, it's a lot easier to manage flooding because you know where the services are, you know what the development plans are. But unfortunately, like most other developing countries, our most vulnerable communities are sitting on banks of rivers in valley lines where the exposure to flooding is the highest. So there has been immediate, initiatives to move people, but that comes with its own challenges. In knowledge exchanges with other countries, we've discovered it's not uncommon. So our immediate steps is to create awareness, give the communities exposure to information, access to emergency services, while we fight this battle of informal settlements along the hazard zones on the rivers. We've also updated policies to mandate on-site management of stormwater through new developments, existing or upgrades to existing developments. We've created guidelines for stormwater designs that have been developed for the Johannesburg context alone. There are also programs with the city, like the city parks, programs where communities are adopting spaces to keep it clean, and that those small initiatives have reduced the impact downstream to the vulnerable communities. Thanks.
Thanks, Natasha, for highlighting that. And I what really caught my attention was when you mentioned that you're also documenting failures and success. So failure was something, because very often we're just talking about practices across the globe which are success, but some of these documentation, especially when in this urban fabric, the dense urban fabric that we're talking about, where it's very difficult to implement a lot of these things. I think happy and glad to hear that everything is being well documented. And without further delay, and I would definitely urge our panelists to keep their comments to 2 minutes or so that I can have a few more questions. Nisha, back to you. So beyond Kadapakam Lake Restoration Project, what other NBS practices is the Chennai Municipal Corporation integrating, especially for stormwater management and to reduce urban flooding risks, again, particularly in vulnerable areas in the city? So from Johannesburg back to Chennai on vulnerable areas, what are the actions being taken by the corporation? Thank you.
Thanks, Priya. So the Kadapakam Lake Restoration Project itself is a part of wetland restoration activities in Chennai. So beyond Kadapakam Lake, there are about 210 water bodies that have been restored by Chennai Corporation. And there are also installation of rainwater harvesting structures. There was a 2004 mandate in Tamil Nadu that all buildings in the state, particularly larger government buildings and houses, should incorporate rainwater harvesting structures. So that is another nature-based solution. So besides buildings, now there is a mandate to incorporate rainwater harvesting structures along the stormwater drains. So in whatever stormwater drains, in every 30 meters, there is this rainwater harvesting pits installed. So far there are about 45,000 rainwater harvesting pits installed along the stormwater drains as management of as part of stormwater management. And again, there are about 200 numbers of sunken wells that are also being set up inside the city. And one more is like the play fields. Some of the plays are identified in Chennai, and a recharge well of 500 cubic meters is also been installed in about 8 play fields in Chennai as part of ongoing projects. So these are some of the nature-based solutions beyond Kadapakam Lake. Thanks.
Thanks, Nisha, for sharing that. Yeah, that's quite a bit of work there in Chennai. So good to know that, this has become a mandate that the rainwater harvesting structures along stormwater drains. I think this definitely needs to become a mandate across cities. So moving from Chennai, again, Ibu Meslin, back to you. We just want to understand how NBS is integrated within Jayapura's existing infrastructure, and what challenges really are being encountered because in the existing urban development plans to align these NBS approaches. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Jayapura City, through Public Works Department, has developed green lanes on the medians of the roads. The Public Works Department also planted shade trees on the left and right sides of the road. The Environmental Agency also planted shade trees on the roadsides in 2017 and previous years. However, since 2018 until now, we have focused on rehabilitating critical land. Furthermore, our agency has also divided the area to create parks managed by each agency in the city level, and also associations and communities. And all of these parks are located along the main road. Due to the rapid development of the city, there has been a lot of land conversion for both for housing and agriculture. So there are catchment areas that are filled in for development, and forests that are cut down for agriculture. That is one of challenges that we face. And we also face another challenges that is the status of the land. So most of the land is owned by the customary owner. So if there are buyers, the land can be traded. So there are two challenges that we are facing in terms of develop green open spaces in Jayapura. Thank you.
Thanks, Ibu Meslin. So I think, yeah, land ownership and identifying that exact space, I think really is a critical issue again in all urban cities. So, but moving on to Mr. Hadimandu. So what really are the benefits, and you did highlight multiple things in the previous conversation, but what really are the benefits that you observe using NBS for water body rejuvenation in Odisha state. Considering, Odisha is hit by cyclones, flooding, a lot of flooding, stormwater surges, and of course heat waves. So, any specific, highlights that you want to share today? Thank you.
You see, the benefits of ecological interventions extend far beyond the immediate vicinity of the water bodies. Healthy water bodies act as natural sponges and absorbing more rainwater, slowing down the runoff, and reducing the severity of the flooding. We have observed at Bhubaneswar and Cuttack also that these water bodies, actually rejuvenation of water bodies helps and to mitigate the effects of floods and droughts, making these cities more resilient to the climatic changes. We have seen it actually earlier when we were studying. Actually, we found that the temperature of this Bhubaneswar city was hardly 32 degrees. Now it is more than 42, 40, even it is escalating to the 48 degrees. You can't imagine. So with this actually, after making all these rejuvenation works, we found something, some changes are happening actually. And these, you can't imagine the heat, water bodies act as the heat sinks and natural air purifiers, absorbing the pollutants and releasing the clean and cool air. This significantly improve air quality, especially densely populated urban areas. We have found it. It is actually when you will move in and around the water bodies, you can find the actually effects. I'm unable to express it actually. The whatever the benefits are so high, we are unable to express it. If you move in and around the water bodies only, you can find it. The naturally the another part of it is the naturally restored water bodies allow more actually percolation through seepage due to what? Due to no barriers like retaining walls are not there, and pitching on embankment and beds are also not there. That's why the percolation of water is high, and it is actually visible actually. The tube wells, actually the depth of the water during the summer, actually it is depleted to 50 feet to 60 feet now. Earlier it was 80 feet to 90 feet. So it is visible now. At present, it is visible. The vicinity in the near vicinity of the water bodies, the water is replenishing of water takes place. That's why we have benefited out of it. The groundwater over the years, actually, the groundwater was exploited, and now the replenishing is happening. Similarly, actually, the quality of the water improves, and native vegetation is restored in the bank, and the diverse range of aquatic and terrestrial species return. It is now visible. This is happening. This is not only enriches the ecosystem, but also boosts the biodiversity. Really, it is we are feeling it and we are observing. Apart from these actually these water bodies, the rejuvenation of water bodies provide range of benefits to public and community, including recreation, healthy atmosphere, and also livelihood for the poor, livelihood opportunity for the poor, and many more things are happening. These are the benefits we have actually received out of due to this rejuvenation of water body. Really, it is giving us pleasure actually. And if you move in and around in the morning and in the evening, you will find it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing, sir. And not just the biophysical kind of goodness of having an NBS solution, but also we share understand your emotion and really the the change that or transformation that probably this has brought around the state of Odisha. Thanks for sharing it. Natasha, over to you again. So we're aware that Johannesburg has been actively involved in the Sankasa project in collaboration with WRI and the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Really, it would be great if you could share insights on how this is shaping Johannesburg management strategy and what key outcomes or learnings have come so far. So if you could share some of.
Thanks, Priya. Yeah, it's actually a program of projects that we have developed, including a transformative riverine management program, open space strategy, urban greening strategy, alien invasives removal project, river strategy development, debris removal. So a lot in that umbrella of nature-based solutions. And it's kind of trying to tackle this problem of flooding from a whole lot of different angles. So you'll very easily see that these projects are complementary to each other. And they were very strategically done so by our WRI program director, Ms. Amanda. To inflate the core benefits of all of these projects. But the one that responds directly to flood management is actually the Transformative Riverine Management Program, or TRMP, that is aimed at using these complementary projects like debris removal or alien invasives removal to proactively maintain the river corridors so that we can create a business case of avoided cost of damage by proactively maintaining the river corridors. And we've chosen one of our main rivers called the XK River to build a case study on. So you'll find most of the projects that are in the program are working on the site area as well. The TRMP project is currently in the hydrological and ecological vulnerability assessment. And this will determine the flood extent, hazard, water quality, map the fauna and flora, invasives, non-invasives, and use this information to build the scenarios for benefit cost analysis. We're trying to follow suit from another municipality, major municipality similar to Johannesburg in the country. It is the Durban municipality. They've successfully done this project and built a business case, and they've got political buy-in and funding to upscale. So the interesting comparisons that we are seeing in the Johannesburg context is that there's a lot more opportunity for stimulation of the green economy. There's lots of buy-in from big businesses like Nando's and a lot of established CBOs on the river corridor already that are just jumping on board. So we are very positive that it's going to yield a very nice springboard for upscaling this to the rest of the city. Thanks.
Thanks very much for sharing that, Natasha, and thanks for sharing about the avoided, at least moving towards computing the avoided cost of damage and some of the other calculation, the ecosystem benefit calculation that's going and probably scaling of that to other cities as well. So we probably may not have too much time to go on to the next question, but if I can take just 10 seconds from each speaker. Like what really in terms of avoiding flooding and nature-based solution, what is that solution which you think at different scales that comes to your mind when I say what would you use to avoid flooding in your cities? And Nisha, just like a couple of words, because we don't have too much time.
Definitely water body restorations and rainwater harvesting structures.
Yeah. And Ibu Meslin, thank you, Nisha. What is it that comes to your mind? The one thing for mitigating in cities. What's that solution?
For Jaipura, I think more of green open spaces.
Terima
kasih. Mr. Hadibandu, what is that one thing that comes to your mind?
I say the water body rejuvenation is really
Okay.
helpful.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Natasha.
I think it's education at grassroots because the information on climate change awareness and nature-based solutions isn't reaching that level. So we need to start doing that at grassroots.
Great. Thanks for that spectrum of things that you shared from across the world, and thanks to so many of the participants. So I think at some point we had 200 plus people joining in from different parts of the world, different time zones. Thank you very much everyone for being part of this. And like I said, I think my colleagues have probably responded to some of your questions on the chat. The other webinar links, the webinars that happened earlier on heat and the vulnerability assessment are also, the links to that would also be shared on the chat. So thank you again, everyone, for being here today. Have a good day. Good night to everybody whose day is going to come to an end.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
very much
you.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
ଶାଗ ଯାଉଥିଲେ ବା ଦୁବାଇ ନା କଣ ଯାଉଥିଲେ କେବେ ସାର୍ ଯିବେ କି ଓ ଏଇ ଏପ୍ରିଲ 9 ଇରାକଲି ଗାର୍ଡେନ ତା ତ ଖୋଲି ଯାଇଥିବ ଆପଣ ଏସଏଲ ଟ୍ରାଭେଲ ଯାଉଛନ୍ତି
Mukta,
Hi, Priya. Yes, I'm here.
yeah, so sorry, you want to again when I said closing remarks, so yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks, Priya, and a huge thank you to our panelists and audience for joining. We could see participation today from across the globe, from Kentucky, USA to Senegal. I could also see some folks from London, Sweden, many folks from global South cities also joining in today. So many thanks for joining us here today. I hope this was an insightful session for you. The entire discussion today not only focused on a wide range of practical solutions, but also highlighted the crucial role of policy and planning as well in developing nature-based solutions and implementing them. The first presentation from my colleague Sahana, that was particularly insightful to see the different nuances in the urban climate water nexus and actually understand why cities face flooding and what are some of the solutions to go ahead on tackling them, also on various levels of scale and nature of these solutions. So thank you, Sahana, for bringing in those insights and speaking to your experience about working in cities and some of the work that WRI India is leading. The panel discussion next was also very engaging. It definitely offered a deep understanding of these challenges in managing urban flooding. Thanks to our panelists for joining and sharing your experiences with us today. Many times what happens is we really just read about the success of case studies and little do we know about the hard work and the efforts and sometimes the failures which also go into the implementation process and what takes to making the project a success. So thank you to the panelists for sharing all your views with us here today. And I hope the session was equally enlightening to all our audience, the students, the practitioners, urban planners, engineers present here in the audience with us today. Just a short note, these are my last remarks. The recording of today's webinar would be available on the UrbanShift platform. And this was the third and the final part of our webinar series. The first webinar focused on climate hazard and vulnerability assessment framework, and the second focused on nature-based solutions to address urban heat. And in a month's time, all the three parts would also be prepared in a self-study module, and they would be at your disposal similarly on the UrbanShift platform. So do keep an eye out on the UrbanShift platform and our notifications for it. Thank you so much. You can also scan in the QR code on the screen to watch the recordings of the first two webinars. And yes, with this, we end the session today. Thank you so much to the panelists, the audience, and everyone for joining here with us. And do reach out to us, or you can reach out to me, Priya, or John Rob, and Sahana if you have any more questions. Thank you. Thanks a lot.